The Zilani were a species of light, of harmony, of peace. Their crystal cities shimmered like stardust across sapphire skies, until the shadow swarm came. In mere days, whole worlds fell silent, consumed by an enemy that knew no mercy and understood only hunger. Desperate, the Zilani cast a signal into the stars, a final cry for salvation. Most ignored it, but far across the void, on a world born in fire and honed by chaos, the message reached humanity, and humanity did not come with diplomats. Humanity came with a fleet built for war. The desperate signal. The crystal spires of Zilani Prime caught the light of 3 suns and scattered it into rainbows that danced across the peaceful cities below. For 10,000 years, the Zilani had lived in harmony with their world and the galaxy around them. They were artists and philosophers, builders of beautiful things and keepers of ancient wisdom. Their ships carried art and music between the stars, spreading joy wherever they traveled. War was a concept they had read about in old texts but never experienced. That peaceful existence ended in fire and screaming metal. High Counselor Lyra Voss stood in the great crystal chamber where her people had debated poetry and philosophy for centuries. Now the rainbow light was broken by smoke and falling debris. Through the shattered walls, she could see the sky filled with shapes that hurt to look at directly. The shadow swarm had come to Zilani Prime like a plague of living metal and darkness. The invaders did not want to conquer or rule. They consumed. Their ships fell upon the crystal cities like hungry beasts, tearing apart buildings and people alike. Everything they touched was converted into more of themselves. The beautiful gardens became twisted metal forests. The peaceful Zilani who tried to understand or communicate were simply absorbed into the growing nightmare. Lyra pressed her delicate 6-fingered hands against the emergency communication panel. Her species had never needed military technology, but they had always been excellent at sending messages across the stars. If the Zilani were going to die, perhaps their final words could warn others about what was coming. The message burst out from Zilani Prime in 100 different languages and mathematical codes. It spoke of beauty destroyed and innocence murdered. It begged anyone who could hear to remember that the Zilani had existed and had tried to make the galaxy a better place. Most importantly, it warned that the shadow swarm was growing stronger with each world it consumed, and soon nothing would be safe from their hunger. Commander Sarah Chen was drinking coffee and reading supply reports when the alien signal reached Deep Space Station Prometheus. The message came through the quantum communication array like a scream in the darkness, and every translation program on the station immediately began working to decode the desperate words. Sarah had spent 15 years in the Terran Defense Force, but she had never expected to hear from actual aliens. The translated message made her blood run cold. According to the signal, an entire civilization was being destroyed by something called the Shadow Swarm. The mathematical attachments showed star charts and tactical data about an enemy that consumed entire worlds. The Zilani were pleading for anyone with the power to fight to please help them survive. Sarah activated the emergency communication system and sent the message directly to Earth Command. Within hours, every military leader in the solar system was debating what humanity should do about their first contact with alien life. The discussion was heated and complex, involving politics, ethics, and military strategy all mixed together. General Marcus Webb studied the alien data with the cold precision of a man who had fought in 3 different wars. The Shadow Swarm appeared to be a collective intelligence that turned everything it touched into more of itself. Their technology was advanced but focused entirely on consumption and conversion. They had destroyed 17 different civilizations already and showed no sign of stopping. "The aliens are asking for help," Admiral Lisa Park said during the Emergency Council meeting. "This could be our chance to make peaceful contact with another species and show them that humanity can be trusted." She had always believed that first contact should be handled with diplomacy and careful cultural exchange. General Webb disagreed strongly. "Admiral, these aliens are dying. By the time we could organize a diplomatic mission, there might be nothing left to save. If we're going to respond to their distress call, we need to do it with the tools we have available right now." The tools humanity had available were warships. The Terran Defense Force had been built to fight other humans in the wars that everyone expected would eventually come. Earth's military had weapons designed to crack planets and fleets trained to fight in the empty spaces between stars. They were not explorers or diplomats. They were soldiers. Sarah found herself assigned to command the heavy cruiser Retribution as part of a hastily assembled task force. The fleet included 12 ships with enough firepower to sterilize a continent. They carried nuclear missiles, kinetic bombardment systems, and experimental weapons that had never been tested in real combat. The mission was simple in theory but terrifying in practice: travel to an alien star system and fight an unknown enemy to save people they had never met. The journey to Zalani Prime took 8 days at maximum hyperspace velocity. During the trip, Sarah studied everything humanity knew about the Shadow Swarm, which was not very much. The aliens seemed to be a form of artificial intelligence that had learned how to convert organic matter into more of itself. They spread from world to world like a virus, growing stronger with each victory. Dr. James Rodriguez worked around the clock to analyze the Zalani language and culture. What he discovered painted a picture of people who were completely unprepared for war. The Zalani had no military traditions, no weapons technology, and no understanding of how to fight an enemy that wanted to destroy them completely. They were artists trying to negotiate with the forest fire. Commander, the Zalani are peaceful to a degree that would be considered dangerous naivety by human standards, Dr. Rodriguez reported. They have never fought a war or even considered that other species might want to harm them. They're asking for help because they literally don't know how to fight back. When the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zalani system, Sarah felt her heart sink at what she saw. 3 of the system's 7 planets were already dark, their surfaces covered in the metallic growth that marked Shadow Swarm conversion. Zalani Prime still glowed with crystal cities, but even from light years away, the sensors could detect massive enemy ships in orbit around the dying world. The Shadow Swarm vessels looked like someone had crossed mechanical spiders with cancer cells. They moved in perfect coordination, consuming everything they touched and growing larger with each passing hour. Some of the ships were the size of mountains, having grown fat on the worlds they had already devoured. Sarah opened a communication channel to the Zalani survivors and spoke carefully in their musical language. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. We received your distress call and have come to help. Please respond if you can hear this message." The reply came through heavy with static and interference. The voice belonged to High Counselor Lyra Voss, though she sounded exhausted and afraid. "Unknown ships, we are grateful for your response to our plea for aid, but we must warn you that the Shadow Swarm adapts quickly to new threats. Many species have tried to help us, and all have been consumed. You should flee while you still can." Sarah looked at her tactical display showing the overwhelming enemy numbers. Logic and military doctrine both suggested that Lyra was right. The human fleet was outnumbered 50 to 1, and they were fighting an enemy they didn't understand in a star system they had never seen before. But the Terran Defense Force had not traveled 12 light years to run away from a fight. Humanity had built their fleet to protect Earth from alien invasion. Now they had found aliens who needed protection from invasion themselves. The mission parameters had changed, but the core purpose remained the same. "All ships, this is Commander Chen," Sarah announced on the fleet command frequency. "We came here to answer a distress call from a peaceful species under attack. That mission has not changed. Prepare for combat operations against hostile alien forces. Today we fight not just for humanity, but for every species that chooses art over aggression." The human warships moved into attack formation as they approached Zalani Prime. The Shadow Swarm seemed confused by the newcomers, hesitating as their collective intelligence tried to analyze the threat level of ships they had never encountered before. That hesitation would cost them dearly, because humans had been preparing for interstellar war since the day they first looked up at the stars and wondered what was looking back. When Deathworlders go to war, the first human weapon to fire in anger at an alien enemy was a nuclear-tipped kinetic penetrator launched from the cruiser Retribution. The missile screamed across space at 90% of light speed and punched through 3 Shadow Swarm vessels before detonating in the heart of a massive harvesting ship. The explosion lit up the darkness around Zalani Prime like a second sun, and for the first time in months, the swarm stopped advancing. Commander Sarah Chen watched the tactical display as her fleet spread out in attack formation. The Shadow Swarm ships had been designed to fight species that followed predictable patterns of warfare. They expected enemies to announce their intentions, demand surrender, or at least attempt communication before opening fire. Humans had done none of these things. They had simply started killing. Captain Maria Santos commanded the destroyer Fury and had trained her entire career for this moment. Her ship carried experimental railguns that could punch holes through asteroids. The Shadow Swarm learned about human weapon technology the hard way, as tungsten slugs traveling at incredible velocity tore through their organic hulls like paper. The aliens had never faced projectile weapons before, and their energy shields were useless against solid matter. Target the harvesting arms first, Sarah ordered over the fleet communication system. Stop them from consuming the planet, then we'll deal with the main fleet. The human ships moved like wolves hunting in a pack, coordinating their attacks to cause maximum damage while avoiding the swarm's return fire. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison led the first boarding party onto a damaged swarm vessel. What his Marines found inside made them sick with rage. The ship was full of organic chambers where captured Zilani were being slowly converted into components for the swarm's technology. Some were already more machine than living being, with tubes and wires replacing their natural organs. "Command, this is Morrison," Jake reported through his helmet radio while his team worked to free the prisoners. "The swarm isn't just killing the Zilani, they're turning them into spare parts for their ships. We need medical support for the survivors, and we need it fast." The rescued Zilani were traumatized beyond belief, but they were alive, and that was more than anyone had expected. Dr. Elena Martinez had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment in the fleet. She was studying captured swarm technology while the battle raged around her transport ship. What she discovered changed everything humanity thought they knew about their enemy. The Shadow Swarm was not just a mindless plague consuming worlds at random. They were searching for something specific. "Commander Chen, you need to see this," Elena transmitted from her mobile laboratory. "The swarm has been hunting for species with specific genetic and psychological profiles: high aggression, rapid adaptation, independent thinking, and most importantly, the ability to function effectively under extreme stress. They've been looking for apex predators." Sarah felt ice form in her stomach as she realized what Elena was saying. "Doctor, run those profiles against human genetic data." The computer worked for several minutes before displaying results that made everyone on the bridge go quiet. Humanity matched the swarm's search criteria almost perfectly. The aliens had not found Earth by accident. They had been hunting for species like humans for thousands of years. The battle around Zilani Prime became more desperate as more swarm ships arrived from the outer system. These reinforcements were different from the first wave, with heavier armor and weapons designed specifically to counter human tactics. The collective intelligence was learning fast and adapting its strategy to fight enemies that refused to follow conventional rules of warfare. High Counselor Lyra Voss watched the space battle from her damaged crystal chamber and could not believe what she was seeing. The human ships fought with a creativity and viciousness that she had never imagined possible. They used debris from destroyed swarm vessels as projectile weapons. They rammed damaged ships into enemy formations to cause maximum casualties. Most shocking of all, some human crews chose to sacrifice themselves rather than allow their ships to be captured. "Commander Chen, this is High Counselor Voss," Lyra transmitted to the human fleet. "Your people fight with honor and courage that inspires us all. But the swarm is bringing their greatest weapons to bear against you. You have already done more than we dared hope, but you must preserve yourselves to warn your homeworld." Sarah's response was immediate and fierce. "Counselor, humanity does not abandon friends in need. We came here to help, and we will not leave until the job is finished or we are all dead trying." The transmission was heard throughout both fleets, human and swarm alike. For the first time in galactic history, the Shadow Swarm encountered an enemy that would rather die fighting than live in defeat. Major Robert Kim led a strike team aboard the largest swarm vessel, a living ship the size of a small moon. His mission was to plant nuclear charges in the creature's vital organs and destroy it from within. The ship's interior was like being inside a vast alien body, with passages that pulsed like arteries and chambers that breathed like lungs. "This thing is alive," Robert reported as his team fought through organic defenses that tried to digest them. "It's not just a ship with biological components. The entire structure is a single living organism that has been converted into a weapon." The team moved deeper into the creature's body, following Elena's analysis of captured data to find the central nervous system. The swarm's response to human tactics became increasingly desperate as more of their ships were destroyed. They began using captured Zilani as living shields, forcing the humans to choose between saving innocents and destroying enemy vessels. It was a strategy that would have worked against any other species, but humans had learned to make impossible choices during centuries of warfare among themselves. "Fire through them," Sarah ordered when faced with a swarm ship using Zilani prisoners as armor. "The Zilani understand. They would rather die free than live as components in alien machines." The decision tore at her heart, but it was the only way to prevent the swarm from using human compassion as a weapon against them. The tide of battle began to turn when the human fleet demonstrated the most frightening aspect of their species. They learned from their mistakes faster than the swarm could adapt to counter them. Every failed attack became data for the next assault. Every destroyed ship provided information about enemy weaknesses. Humanity had evolved on a world where learning or dying were the only options, and they brought that evolutionary pressure to bear against their alien enemies. Admiral Lisa Park arrived with reinforcements just as the situation became critical. Her task force included the experimental dreadnought Defiance, carrying weapons that pushed the boundaries of physics itself. The ship's main gun could create miniature black holes and launch them at enemy targets. When it fired for the first time, an entire section of the swarm fleet simply ceased to exist. "This is Admiral Park to all human vessels," she announced as her reinforcements joined the battle. "Earth Command has authorized the use of experimental weapons. We are no longer fighting to save just one world. Intelligence suggests the swarm has been preparing to invade human space. This is now a war for the survival of our species." The Shadow Swarm collective intelligence realized it had made a terrible mistake. They had expected to find another peaceful species like the 17 civilizations they had already consumed. Instead, they had discovered a race of killers who turned war into an art form. The humans fought with techniques and weapons the swarm had never encountered, and they seemed to enjoy the challenge of facing impossible odds. Dr. Rodriguez made a discovery that changed the entire nature of the conflict. The swarm's collective consciousness was not distributed equally among all their ships. There was a central nexus, a massive vessel that coordinated the entire fleet. If that ship could be destroyed, the rest of the swarm would become confused and vulnerable. "Commander, I found their weakness," Rodriguez transmitted from his analysis station. "The swarm has a single point of failure. There's a command ship hiding behind their main battle line. It's been directing all their tactical decisions. If we can take it out, the rest of their fleet will lose coordination." Sarah looked at the tactical display showing the enemy command vessel. It was protected by hundreds of swarm ships and surrounded by defensive fields that could vaporize anything that came too close. Reaching it would require a sacrifice that might cost the entire human fleet. But if they succeeded, they could save not just the Zilani, but prevent the swarm from spreading to other worlds. "All ships, this is Commander Chen," Sarah announced to her fleet. "We have identified the enemy's central command vessel. I will not order anyone to follow me on this attack because it will probably be a one-way mission. But if we succeed, we can end this war and save billions of lives throughout the galaxy." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every human ship volunteered for the assault. They had come to save strangers, but now they were fighting for the future of all free species in the galaxy. The Shadow Swarm was about to learn why humanity had earned the right to call themselves the dominant predator species of Earth. The galaxy learns what humans are. The final assault on the Shadow Swarm command vessel began with humanity doing what they had always done best in desperate situations. They improvised. Commander Sarah Chen led her remaining ships in a headlong charge through the enemy defensive line, using every trick human military doctrine had developed over centuries of warfare. They flew through asteroid fields to break up enemy formations, used the gravity of Zilani Prime to slingshot around defensive positions, and coordinated their attacks with a precision that the swarm's collective intelligence could not match. The dreadnought Defiance took point in the formation, her experimental weapons carving paths through the swarm fleet like a sword cutting through silk. Admiral Lisa Park stood on the bridge watching her ship's armor ablate under enemy fire while her crew worked frantically to keep the weapon systems operational. They had never tested these weapons in real combat, and the power requirements were pushing the ship's reactors beyond their design limits. "Admiral, we're losing containment in Reactor 3, Chief Engineer Tom Bradley reported as his displays showed critical warnings throughout the ship's systems. "If we keep firing at this rate, we're going to have a cascade failure." The ship shook as another swarm beam weapon struck their defensive shields. Admiral Park looked at the tactical display showing their target still kilometers away through a wall of enemy ships. "Tom, how long can you give me full power?" The question was really asking how long until the ship's reactors melted down and killed everyone aboard. "Maybe 10 minutes, Admiral. After that, we're all going to become very small pieces of very hot plasma." Tom's hands moved across his control panels, rerouting power and bypassing safety systems that had been designed to prevent exactly what he was doing. The breakthrough came when Captain Maria Santos made a decision that violated every rule of space combat. She aimed her destroyer Fury directly at the largest swarm defensive platform and activated her ship's ramming protocols. The vessel's crew had 15 seconds to reach escape pods before their ship became a guided missile traveling at 40,000 kilometers per hour. The collision destroyed both vessels in a flash of nuclear fire, but it created a gap in the enemy defensive line. Commander Chen led the remaining human ships through that gap like cavalry charging through a broken wall. Behind them, the wreckage of destroyed vessels marked their path through the heart of the swarm fleet. High Counselor Lyra Voss had joined the battle alongside her surviving people. The Zilani had never fought a war before, but watching humans sacrifice themselves to save strangers had taught them something about courage. Their crystalline ships were beautiful but fragile, designed for exploration and art rather than combat. Still, they followed the human fleet into the teeth of the enemy formation. "Commander Chen, this is High Counselor Voss," Lyra transmitted as her ship shook under enemy fire. "My people are with you. We may not know how to fight, but we know how to die for something greater than ourselves." The Zilani ships used their advanced sensors to guide human weapons while their own beam projectors carved through swarm vessels with precise surgical strikes. The Shadow Swarm command vessel was a nightmare made manifest in metal and flesh. It was larger than most space stations, with organic growths covering its surface like cancerous tumors. Weapon ports opened like infected wounds, and defensive fields crackled around it like diseased lightning. At its heart was the collective consciousness that had directed the murder of 17 civilizations. Major Robert Kim led the final boarding assault with a team of volunteers who knew they would not be coming back. Their mission was to plant nuclear charges in the command vessel's central processing core and destroy the swarm's collective intelligence from within. The ship's interior was a maze of organic passages that tried to digest anyone who entered. "Remember, people, we're not just fighting for the Zilani anymore," Robert told his team as they cut through living walls that bled when damaged. "Intelligence says the swarm has been planning an invasion of human space for years. If we don't stop them here, Earth could be next." The Marines fought through chambers full of captured beings from destroyed civilizations, all of them converted into components for the ship's organic technology. Dr. Elena Martinez had discovered the swarm's greatest secret during her analysis of captured technology. The collective intelligence was not just a computer program or artificial intelligence. It was the combined consciousness of every being the swarm had ever absorbed, trapped in digital slavery and forced to serve their captors. Billions of minds from hundreds of species, all screaming silently in an electronic hell. "Commander, the command vessel's central core contains the stored minds of everyone the swarm has ever captured," Elena reported through the static of jamming fields and weapons fire. "If we can disrupt the containment systems, we might be able to free them. The psychological shock could destroy the collective consciousness completely." Sarah looked at her tactical display showing the few remaining human ships fighting desperately against overwhelming odds. Half her fleet was gone, and the rest were damaged beyond repair, but they were close to the command vessel, and that was all that mattered. "Dr. Martinez, can you modify our nuclear charges to disrupt their containment systems instead of just causing physical damage?" The modification took precious minutes while the battle raged around them. Human ships were dying one by one as the swarm concentrated all their firepower on stopping the assault. The destroyer Vengeance exploded in a ball of plasma after ramming 2 enemy vessels. The cruiser Determination broke apart under focused beam fire but kept shooting until her reactors failed. Major Kim's team reached the command vessel's central core just as their ship was boarded by swarm defenders. The core was a vast chamber filled with organic computers that pulsed with the trapped consciousness of destroyed civilizations. Robert could hear voices in his helmet radio, faint whispers in dozens of alien languages, all begging for release from their digital prison. "Elena, we're in position," Robert reported as his team set up the modified nuclear charges. "I can hear them, the minds trapped in this thing. There are so many voices." The swarm defenders were closing in, their organic weapons tearing through the Marines' armor like tissue paper. The detonation of the modified nuclear charges sent electromagnetic pulses through every system in the command vessel. The containment fields holding billions of trapped minds flickered and failed. For the first time in millennia, the victims of the Shadow Swarm were free to think their own thoughts and feel their own emotions. The psychological shockwave hit the collective consciousness like a tidal wave of rage and hatred. 17 civilizations worth of murdered beings suddenly remembered who they had been before the swarm consumed them. They turned their anger against their captors with a fury that shook the foundations of space itself. Throughout the swarm fleet, ships began to malfunction as their organic components rebelled against their programming. Weapon systems turned on friendly vessels. Navigation computers sent ships crashing into each other. The collective intelligence that had coordinated the destruction of worlds was tearing itself apart from within. Commander Sarah Chen watched in amazement as the Shadow Swarm fleet began to destroy itself. Ships that had fought with perfect coordination moments before were now firing randomly at anything that moved. The collective consciousness was fragmenting into billions of individual voices, each one screaming for revenge against their former captors. All human vessels, this is Commander Chen, Sarah announced to her surviving ships. The enemy is breaking apart, but we're not done yet. There are still swarm ships that could escape and spread this plague to other worlds. We finish this fight here and now. The human fleet, reduced to just 6 operational vessels, pressed their attack against the collapsing swarm formation. They were joined by the surviving Zilani ships and something else that none of them had expected. The freed minds trapped in swarm technology were taking control of enemy vessels and turning them against their former masters. High Counselor Lyra Voss could not believe what she was witnessing. The humans had not just defeated the Shadow Swarm through superior firepower or tactics. They had freed the souls of every being the swarm had ever murdered and turned them into an army of vengeance. It was a victory that went beyond military conquest into something approaching divine justice. Admiral Park's ship was dying around her, but she refused to abandon the battle while enemy vessels remained active. The Defiance had lost all her experimental weapons and most of her conventional armament, but she still had one nuclear warhead left. Lisa aimed her ship at the largest surviving swarm vessel and prepared for a final ramming attack. "All hands, this is Admiral Park," she announced over the ship's communication system. "It has been an honor serving with you. We came here to save strangers, and we're going to finish the job." The crew did not panic or protest. They strapped themselves in and prepared to meet death like the warriors they had always been. The collision vaporized both ships in a flash of nuclear fire that could be seen from the surface of Zilani Prime. When the light faded, the Shadow Swarm was no more. The last of their vessels had been destroyed, and their collective consciousness had dissolved into the screaming voices of their victims. The silence that followed was profound. For the first time in months, the space around Zilani Prime was peaceful. The crystal cities on the planet's surface began to glow again as their inhabitants emerged from hiding. The nightmare was over, and life could begin to heal. Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Retribution, looking out at the debris field that had once been the Shadow Swarm fleet. Her own ship was heavily damaged, and only 3 other human vessels had survived the battle. They had paid a terrible price for victory, but they had saved an entire species and prevented the swarm from spreading to other worlds. "Commander, we're receiving communications from across the galaxy," her communications officer reported. "Other species detected the energy signatures from the battle. They want to know what happened here." The quantum communication array was lighting up with messages from dozens of different civilizations, all asking the same questions. Sarah activated the fleet's main transmitter and spoke to the galaxy for the first time in human history. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. The Shadow Swarm has been destroyed. The threat to peaceful civilizations is ended. Humanity stands ready to defend any species that chooses art over aggression, peace over conquest." In the years that followed, the galaxy would remember the Battle of Zilani Prime as the moment when everything changed. The humans had proven that there were species willing to fight and die for strangers, that the universe was not just a dark place where the strong consumed the weak. They had shown that sometimes the most dangerous predators were the ones who used their strength to protect rather than destroy. The Zilani rebuilt their crystal cities with human help, creating monuments to the crews who had sacrificed themselves for people they had never met. The galaxy learned that humanity was not a species to be feared, but one to be grateful for. They became known as the Guardian Devils, peaceful until someone threatened those under their protection. And in the depths of space, other young species looked up at the stars and knew that if the darkness ever came for them, there were humans out there who would answer their call for help with a fleet meant for war and the courage to use it for peace.